After being transferred from the headquarters to a branch office, I moved into a rundown apartment. But in the next door of that rundown apartment, I've witnessed something I can't believe. My name is Rick Johnson, 30 years old. I'm just an ordinary office worker who was transferred to a rural branch office last month. It's a fairly decent company with a large building in New York as its headquarters, but one day, I made an error at work and was held responsible for it, resulting in a demotion. Despite the mistake was indeed partly my fault. I honestly think that making me solely responsible isn't right, but that's what I think. After all, I'm just an ordinary employee. I have to accept that I've become the company's sacrificial lamb, the scapegoat. Besides, the headquarters was a very tense environment, all about results and promotions. On the other hand, the rural branch office is more laid back. So in a way, I feel fortunate for being transferred. Well, that's the way I started to think after a month of the move. Hence, I guess you could say my life is going pretty smoothly. That's what I'd say. In the end, everyone has some troubles in life. Clatter, bang. Seriously, it started again. As I was transferred to this countryside, I rejected the company housing and instead chose to move into this rundown apartment. I wanted to avoid meeting my coworkers in private as much as possible. Growing up in a single-parent household, I was used to this kind of shabby apartment with only 8 units, but due to the condition of the apartment, there's bound to be some noise. And now, the noise from the corner room next door is bothering me. Luckily, I live on the second floor and the corner room on the first floor is vacant. So basically, I'm the only one affected by this noise. And that's why it seems that no complaints have been lodged against my neighbor, so far. I remember a young woman was living next door. Similar to me, she moved in last month and has come to greet me before. She seemed polite and gentle, but bang, thud. I never thought she would be the type to make such a racket. It doesn't occur every day, but about twice a week. The sound is so tremendous, it's like she's practicing wrestling or something. Well, humans do make loud noises from time to time. So at first, I only thought she was struggling with getting used to her new life or unpacking after the move. But for it to continue like this, it's really something. However, I want to avoid neighborhood trouble, and it's not like the noise happens every week. What's the best way to address this without causing tension? As I was wondering about that, something unexpected happened. Enough. Stop it. Get out. For the first time, I heard my neighbor scream. The scream surprised me, and I braced myself, thinking it might be a serious fight. It was such a loud voice. And in midnight too. What on earth happened? I'm sick and tired of this every time. What did I do? Get out, you. Stay away. Somebody help. What? Do I need to call the police? But even if I do, it will take time for the police to arrive after reporting it. What if something happens in the meantime? I felt as if my neighbor was calling for help, so I immediately went outside and knocked on her door. It's Rick Johnson from next door. What happened? Is everything okay? I called out, but all I could hear from inside was the sound of frantic wrestling. This is seriously bad, isn't it? I panicked, quickly grabbing the doorknob, and, to my surprise, the front door was unlocked. Without a second thought, I opened the door and went inside. But then, eek, whoa. The sight that met my eyes was shocking. A woman lightly clothed wildly waving a bath towel, and there's a mysterious black creature flying around the room. Could that be a bat? It's not uncommon for bats to invade homes in the countryside. There are even professionals who specialize in removing them. At first, the woman seemed surprised to see me, but she was more focused on dealing with the bat. Please help me with the bat. Sure. Bats are protected by law, so you can't hurt or capture them. On top of that, they are pretty fast too, so it's hard to keep up with them. Maybe the bat was surprised by my presence, but it started to fly around more erratically, and I quickly grabbed an umbrella from the entrance to block its path. Then I managed to successfully push it out through an open window. Phew, I've dealt with them occasionally back home, but I never thought I'd encounter one here. Thank you so much. The bat was gone, and the woman, who is still very lightly clothed, bowed her head in gratitude. Her name was Kathy Miller. She told me that a bat had invaded her home after she got out of the bath, and she exploded in anger as they seemed to come every week. Because I was uncomfortable with her clothing, I ended up promptly excusing myself. Since it was awkward for both of us to visit at night, Kathy came by later with a gift of sweets. I really appreciate your help. I'm sorry if the noise disturbed you. It's fine, but those bat troubles sure were a terrible misfortune. According to Kathy, the bats come nearly every week, and she was struggling to figure out what to do. I can't find any possible entry points, and even if I open the windows, I make sure to keep the screens closed. Somehow they always find a way. Oh, bats can enter through a gap as small as half an inch. What? You might want to check if there are any holes in your screens. They used to come into my family's home through holes in the screens too. Like I said, bats used to appear in my home as well, and Kathy was very pleased when I offered her some advice on bat prevention. She is an attractive woman, and as you know, for seeing her in that kind of clothing, she has a great figure too. Her beautiful long hair reaching down to her waist really suits her. So, it does feel nice to make a woman happy, and it makes me want to be a little meddlesome. From then, there was no more noise made from Kathy's room, and we started greeting each other occasionally when we passed. But still, why would a young woman be living in such a shabby apartment? She seems a little careless, but she should be young, perhaps a student. Does she want to save up as a new graduate? That's really an individual's issue, so I shouldn't say too much, but I can't help to worry. As I was secretly concerned about her, life had various connections. Amazingly, this year, Kathy was assigned to my company as a new hire. New hires train at the headquarters for 1 month and then are moved to the headquarters or branch offices depending on their abilities. So, the new hires arrive a bit late every year, but I never thought Kathy would be the one to come. She's young, and I thought she might be a student, but apparently she's a new graduate. It's sad for a new graduate to be assigned to a place like this, but the personnel decisions are out of her control, so I guess it couldn't be helped. I never thought you would be in the same department. I was surprised too. Nice to meet you, senior. Please drop the senior. I've only been on assigned for a month yet. Though I'm her senior in the working field, as branch employees, we're still in the same year. And the fact of being neighbors, this is a kind of strange relationship. But if she's an employee, why live in such a run-down apartment? I wondered, but it's not right to ask about personal matters. As long as her private life doesn't interfere with her work, it's fine. After that, Kathy and I often worked together. Rather, we mostly acted as a pair. I may be new to the branch, but I have a lot of work experience, so I was her mentor in professional matters. I taught her how to hand out business cards, send emails, and things like that. Kathy was very serious about her work. She would come to me with questions right away, and always showed her gratitude. She's very cheerful too, so she became popular in the department right away. But popularity doesn't necessarily mean she's good at her job, and Kathy makes many careless mistakes. Small errors like inputting wrong numbers or checking issues. Even though she's careful, she doesn't seem to get over it. I'm sorry for always causing you trouble. It's fine. I think I'm starting to know where you often make mistakes, so if the two of us are careful, we'll be fine. 6 months have passed after joining the company. Kathy and I have become good friends, having lunch together and going out for drinks occasionally. Well, after all, we live next door to each other. Since that bad incident, I was able to gain Kathy's trust, but because of that, she sometimes overblames herself for her mistakes. Sure, there were some nearly significant mistakes, but luckily, I caught them while checking, and if we can prevent them in advance, that's fine. Doing our best, and not making a mistake next time. Sometimes, that pressure induces even more mistakes, and I want Kathy to relax more at work. So I tried not to be overly critical. But for others, my guidance appeared overly lenient, and before I knew it, there were murmurs that I was treating Kathy too gently. Because I don't guide her properly, she never seemed to fix her mistakes. At least, few people seem to have that idea. When are you going to get over your student mentality? I'm sorry. When I returned to the office in the late afternoon after a meeting with a client, one of the senior managers was yelling at Kathy. I rushed over to hear the story, but was dismissed with "It's none of your business." Apparently, she had made a small input error and was being scolded. The mistake itself was no big deal, and there was no need to yell like that. I honestly thought it was too much. Of course, it's unavoidable to scold someone for making continuous mistakes. But some of the words from the senior manager were excessively offensive about Kathy's characteristics. Obviously, I stepped in to stop that, but Kathy seemed very down, looking pale. That day, me and Kathy left work together, but I could hear Kathy crying in her room. I'm such a fool. I didn't have the courage to scold her and made excuses for it. I didn't want her to hate me or feel distant from me. We coddling her like that ended up causing her much more pain. I should have been the one to say it. You need to be more careful, watch out for mistakes. Me believing that I could just cover up her mistakes, that's incredibly arrogant and also rude to her. I realized then that I had been stifling her opportunities to grow. I spent the night in a greater shock and regret than when I was transferred to the branch office. Then, a week had passed. Even after a week, Kathy's face was still pale. She was clearly pushing herself too hard. Without a moment of relaxation, she continued to check her own work and mistakes. The cheerful smile that had brightened the department was completely gone. Even if I tried to talk to her, she would avoid me, probably because she didn't want to bother me, saying, "I'm sorry, I'm in a hurry right now." In that way, Kathy was working hard, but she was being called out by the senior manager almost every day, having her mistakes pointed out, and being abused. I guess it's supposed to be guidance or something, but every single day, he continued to yell at her, treating her quite horribly. I did try to stop it, but the senior manager wouldn't try to listen, insisting, "This is guidance, and if such days are repeated, a person will eventually reach their limit." Sure enough, Kathy suddenly started crying quietly during work. She didn't intend to cry, but probably couldn't stop herself. Thinking that crying will solve anything, typical of someone whose brain is still like a student's. What? I couldn't believe my ears. Wait, what is this guy saying after pushing her this far? It's impressive how you can belittle people as easily as breathing. You can do it without a second thought. Before I knew it, I was saying such a sarcastic thing to my senior manager. My senior manager glared at me and came saying, "What? Did you say something, Rick?" But I couldn't stop. I said, "It's amazing how you can live without any guilt after pushing her this far." "What did you say?" My senior manager grabbed me by the collar. I knew that he had been worried about his poor performance lately and was under a lot of stress. But that doesn't mean he should take it out on someone else. Sensing that things were getting out of hand, others stepped in to stop him, and Kathy and I were ordered to go home for the day. Kathy was crying the whole time, but also stayed expressionless. In that moment, I finally realized that something was seriously wrong and urged her to take a leave of absence. "I want you to rest for now. I'm sorry that I couldn't help you until it got to this point." Rick. Kathy was still downcast, and she soon went on leave. A few days later, for some reason, I was called to the headquarters. Maybe they reported the trouble I'd caused at the branch. Above all, I'm an employee who was demoted from the headquarters after making a mistake. I don't believe the company would forgive me after 2 misconducts. I guess I'll be fired. But that might be okay. It's better not to have someone who can't even protect a junior colleague who admired me. With that thought in mind, I knocked on the president's office door with trembling hands. "Come in." I opened the door to the president's office, nervous at the sound of the president's voice, which I hadn't heard in a long time. But there. Wait. Kathy. I saw the president sitting in his chair and Kathy sitting hopelessly on the sofa. Despite I was in the president's office, I was completely shocked by her unexpected appearance and raised my voice. "I mean, she was supposed to be on leave. Why is she here?" As I stood there stunned, Kathy looked at me and said, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I'm the president's daughter." The president's daughter. And wait, more importantly, are you feeling okay? I was more concerned about her being in this place than the bombshell she had dropped. She looked very exhausted, and it would be better if she took some rest. So, without thinking, I blurted out those words, and Kathy smiled faintly at me and turned her eyes to the president, her father. "I told you, Dad. Rick doesn't care about titles or anything like that." "That seems to be the case, Rick. Thank you for protecting my daughter. She told me everything. You stood up for Kathy, didn't you?" "No, I didn't protect her. I couldn't help her when she was suffering." I dropped my head to what President said as her father. But it was Kathy who denied what I've said. "The doctor said it was okay because you got me to the hospital early. It's all thanks to you for recommending me to take a leave. I would have gotten mentally ill if it had been a little later." Really, mental illnesses are difficult to cure and can easily recur. I was really worried about Kathy's mental state. Thus, I was relieved to know that she had been properly examined and has managed to avoid falling into depression. Following my relief, I finally started to have various doubts and questions. The president have answered all of them for me. First of all, the reason why Kathy started working at the branch office was because she wanted to hide her identity as the president's daughter. However, it's a rare thing that a normal newcomer starts to work at the head's office. Hence, she used her mother's maiden name and began working at the branch office. Although, on her document, she still had the same last name as the president, so there were few people at the office who knew her true identity. As for the rundown apartment, it was because she wanted to live alone and refused to live in the company's housing. She ended up choosing the property without the help of her family. Well, they probably didn't imagine that bats would come out. And about the mistake. After investigating, we found out that your boss intentionally changed the data and scolded Kathy. As the frequency of mistakes were so high, the people in the department were starting to feel suspicious. In other words, the boss was deliberately framing her and treating Kathy harshly. Later, it was found out that the boss was suffering with his poor performance at that time. On top of this, his family life wasn't going well either, which had reached to the point of divorce mediation. Due to this, he was under a lot of stress. In the midst of that, Kathy was assigned to the department and quickly became popular. It seemed like he was feeling jealous of her. While he was struggling with his life, Kathy was young and pampered by others. He was unable to tolerate this situation. As for the punishment of the boss, we'll take care of it. But as a father, I have a favor to ask of you. I want you to help Kathy's return to society. The president said as he bowed his head. This is something that should never have happened. And the emotional damage Kathy has suffered won't heal easily. Unfortunately, many employees at the headquarters know she's the president's daughter, but you cared about Kathy even after you knew her true identity, and didn't even mind. You are the only person I can trust. I know it's shameful, but please. As a father, he wanted to help his daughter to reintegrate into society. I could imagine his feelings. I glanced at Kathy. Would I be good enough? No, there's no need to think about it. I've been regretting it all along, haven't I? That I couldn't protect Kathy. I don't want to feel that way again, no way. If I'm good enough, please let me help you. In this way, I was transferred back to the headquarters with Kathy, and acted as her supporter so she could return to work without fear. At the headquarters we worked together, and when Kathy made a mistake, I pointed it out. I also acted as a stopper so that Kathy wouldn't work too hard. As a result, while receiving counseling, Kathy gradually increased her attendance, and a year later, she was able to return to her normal life. It was her hard work that allowed her to recover in a year. At first, I was very worried about how she still cried at night and always seemed down, but I'm really glad she came better. Why did I know she was crying at night? Well, that's the thing. Kathy and I started living together. You see, we both moved from the countryside, and Kathy would get anxious at night, so... Oh no, at first it was like half living together situation, you know. When we first moved, we obviously had separate apartments. But Kathy would often call me at night, and I was also worried, so I ended up staying over a lot. As I spent more nights at Kathy's place, I gradually left my stuff there, and before I knew it, we were in a half-living together situation. But that was kind of half-hearted, so I made up my mind. I was so determined that I begged my boss, saying, "Please let me protect Kathy," and got permission to live together. And then, when Kathy was fully recovered, I proposed to her. We submitted our marriage paperwork last month and officially became husband and wife. Good morning, Rick. My everyday begins with seeing Kathy's smile. I thought it was the end when I was transferred to a countryside branch office, but thanks to that, I met Kathy. In a way, I'm thankful for the bat that flew into a room that day. Anyway, right now I'm having the best time of my life. And I know I'll never make Kathy cry, never again. As I deeply promised myself, Kathy and I start heading to our office together. Being the next CEO candidate is surely a busy role. What did you think of this story? Subscribing to the channel will become a great encouragement for our next production. Well then, see you in the next video.